At the time of making this video, Hansi Flick has not yet been confirmed as the coach of Barcelona. But we're going to take a look and draw parallels between his Bayern Munich side in particular into Barcelona and what you can maybe expect from Hansi Flick. As always, guys, please do subscribe to the channel. It's going to help us a lot to get the family to grow even bigger. We upload weekly content regarding FC Barcelona in particular and only. So join me as we take a look at Hansi Flick's build-up play and the significant changes he has made and what you can expect at Barca. A significant change he made was moving Alaba to a left centre-back and promote Alphonso Davies to left-back. Because when Bayern was under pressure, he wanted to have a left footer to be an outlet, not only to play the ball to the fullback, but since teams were pressing high, they could easily just play the ball in behind that left back and force the opposition back. If Flick do insist to have a left-footed centre-back at left centre-back, we might see Inigo Martinez stay at Barcelona, or we might even see the arrival of another left-footed centre-back. However, where does that leave the likes of Eric Garcia, Araujo, Koundé, and Christensen and Kubarsi? So it's going to be interesting. Verticality for Flick also meant finding the pivots and also the Raumdeuter, the number 10, which was Müller in this case. However, also responsibility for the number 9 to be able to cover the elder flank to balance things out. He also expected his wingers to be able to go and invert into the midfield, ultimately drawing that left back or fullback narrow, which allowed the pacey Alphonso Davies to go and get the ball in behind, which would draw the left winger or the right winger back. So we can expect a lot of fluidity with Hansi Flick, especially if we can have the right players in the right positions. Now, if that's going to be the case, it's going to be a different story, of course. However, we will see a lot more fluidity and we will be seeing less patterns of plays and simulations like we saw under Xavi. Teams started to allow Bayern to come through the first phase of build-up because of verticality, and if teams did press their centre-backs, they would simply just shift into a back three in order to outnumber the opposition, or Manuel Neuer would become the third man. And they were obsessed with finding the centre-backs if one of them should be pressed, and they tried to be press resistant. Also, if the centre-backs were still pressed, then Kimmich or Goretzka would drop into that space in order to receive the ball in the pivot position. Bayern also stayed true to their position and their normal 4-3-3 when they had to. Because Bayern knew that if Kimmich were pressed, then that would open up space for the likes of Thomas Müller and also Leon Goretzka. They would not be as a pivot statically, but they would still receive the ball in between the lines. Here you see the 4-3-3, even though Bayern line up as a 4-2-3-1 with Kimmich deeper and Goretzka more of a box-to-box midfielder. So I can really see Frenkie de Jong having a space. But let's see how he uses his fullbacks in the build-up play, because it's something that caught my eye and it's different that I've seen from other managers and how they use their fullbacks. Compared to other managers, in the build-up phase, Hansi Flick wants his fullbacks to stay extremely deeper in order to receive the ball, therefore drawing the opposition into a press. And if they do fall for the bait, Flick knows that the space will be higher up the pitch for the wingers, and then they would literally be one-on-one. The overlapping do come at times when Alphonso Davies will overlap. So Balde and whoever plays there would have to be insanely fit. But the overlapping only happens at times. It doesn't necessarily mean that the winger will constantly invert into the half space, therefore the fullback has to overlap. When needed, they will first play the ball and then the fullback or the left back or whatever has to adjust his positioning according to what the winger does. If the winger inverts, then you see the fullback overlapping. But if you see them do this, it's going to be extremely well executed, right? Like here's an example where you can see the fullback of the opposition in this case has been drawn all the way to Alphonso Davies, who remains deep. So that guarantees that Perisic will definitely be in space, right? And look here, you can see Perisic out wide and therefore Davies operates in the half space. With Barcelona, you've always seen that the fullback always overlaps. So there's some variety and fluidity. And from deep, the fullback is also expected to stay deep and then make long busting runs in behind. This is where we talked about a left-footed centre-back where they play the ball. Verticality is the name of the game for Hansi Flick. You can see here Alaba plays Davies in behind. So Balde, my friend, I think you're going to have to be insanely fit for this, right? Here you can also see that when the winger inverts, you see then Benjamin Pavard win forward. There's not really automation where you already see Pavard, for example, already high when the winger's inverted. No, there's movement. And now you can see the opposition is on the back foot because the fullback is running in space. Where at Barca, that fullback would already be receiving the ball out wide. So the opposition is better prepared. Coutinho, I forgot this guy's name. He inverts. Davies only then goes forward, but with Barca, the fullback is already high. You can see Coutinho is also expected to be able to keep the width, even though he's not an out-and-out winger. So really great fluidity and verticality. But let's see how Mr. Hansi Flick uses his double pivot, which is also a very, different way of using it, and a lot of fluidity. The double pivot at times do create in the high press. In the build-up phase, they do stay as a pivot, right? But when they are marked, often at times, you do see that the one goes into the half space where the other one will sit as a pivot alone. This also dragged the opposition into a press over to one side. Don't forget the deepness of the fullbacks in this case, where the left-footed centre-back, when pressed, one of the double pivots, they would do line-breaking passes, or they would simply just play it over the top. Can you see how it all comes together? If they find Perisic, you see the number 10 running to the number 9 position, and then the fullback overlaps. So really some crisp playing from Hansi Flick. Here you can see the pivot as normal as they build up. They look like any other team, But look at when they get pressed, or they get marked. Then you go see Kimmich is in the half space and Leon Goretzka is in the pivot position, which ultimately opens up Alphonso Davies, where he can then find Perisic. Flick wants to use this tactic higher up the pitch as well, but you do see a distinction. Even though there's a lot of fluidity, Leon Goretzka was the one who stayed up high. And when they went to do this, this is also their overload to isolate tactic, which Muller would just fill in the space in wherever it appears, right? And they would try to find Alaba. They would always try to find a centre-back in this half space where he can play the ball out wide to Fonzo, or they could simply just be vertical and then play Perisic in behind. So this is some crazy tactics. To make this even more one-on-one situation type thing, they would actually draw the player out of position. And now, not only one-on-one, you can also see a 2-on-1 where Fonzo Davies then would go into the space and then just play with Ivan Perisic, and that is how they find the buy-in line. Like in this picture, you can see Leon Goretzka is definitely the one who's higher, and Kimmich in the pivot position trying to receive the ball, and they do it freely. It's crazy because of verticality. They stretch the opposition vertically. They play the ball in behind in normal 4-3-3. Here you can see the ball is on its way to Thomas Müller. You also see Thiago, who was the one who's going to be like the box-to-box midfielder dropping deep. You can see Kimmich directing play. Look at where's Goretzka. So a lot of play and not simulation like you see at Barcelona, right? Or at any other team. More fluidity. They play the ball over the top if they want to, with straight from Kimmich dropping deep and play the ball over the top. Kimmich can find these type of players as well, And here you can again see this is also Kimmich. In this game, he played as a centre back, but now you see the fullback. I don't know specifically who that is, but him and Goretzka. Flick doesn't want to rely on systems or wingers for creativity. He actually wants to control the game. They need to be able to move around because Flick stretches teams vertically. They need to be able to fill in. When the one is pressed, the other one has to move in, or both of them has to move in the cam as well. Lewandowski also had to move in at times. So there's a lot of fluidity and movement centrally because of the verticality. They need to be able to fill in overlapping. So Flick mainly wanted to have the likes of Thiago and Kimmich on the ball. Maybe we'll see that at Barcelona with Gundogan, Pedri. Maybe we're going to see all of these players a little bit deeper. You can see when they had to drop as a centre-back, Thiago went higher. So there was a lot of relationships and partnerships within the midfield of Flick. So are we going to see that at Barcelona? However, let's take a look at Bayern Munich's and Flick's final third tactics, which is something really interesting, very different from what we saw at other teams, A lot of Flick's build-up tactics stays consistent within the final third as well. Verticality. Mostly the centre-backs receive the ball and there's a lot of movement and dropping in the midfield because the opposition is so stretched. They want to find each other in between the lines and everybody just stay true to their positioning, all right? Overlapping also happens all the time. And like I said earlier in the video, the positioning of the fullback depends on where the winger is going to be. So no simulation, but a lot more fluidity and variation. Here you can see how open Bayern Munich really plays, and the opposition really has to adjust to that, right? So they were extremely stretched, right? This also allowed Bayern Munich to have a lot more line-breaking passes, right? Because they were so open, because they were so vertical, and I can really see somebody like Kubarsi having game time for Hansi Flick, right? You can see here Jerome Boateng plays the ball straight to the number 9, and that's allowing them, because of the verticality that you saw, right? And when they receive the ball, you can see here Perisic is out wide. Is this Jamal Musiala? Now you can see him in the half space. So there was no really simulation like you saw with Xavi's tactics. Close to the box, you also see some verticality from Bayern Munich. And even though I did say that there's a lot more fluidity, some tactics just happens more often than the others. And there's a lot of emphasis also on staying in your position. A lot of isolated tactics doesn't happen here, where you see they want to get the winger in one-on-one situations. And even if the inverting happens, you can see it's not always that you're going to see the inverted fullback, but they do tend to get the fullback in the half space as well, finally higher up the pitch, where you can see movement happening and opposite movement happening, where they want to cross the ball from the half space. Especially Kimmich and the centre backs does this. You can see when the ball is passed wide to Alphonso Davies, in this instance, you did see that nobody really comes to him, right, and try to support him. They leave him in one-on-one situation, and he ultimately beats his man, and they try to attack the byline, right? So we're going to need a left winger if we want to do this, if we want to play the Flick way. That's almost for certain. And then you can also see very vertical play from Bayern. You can see there's a lot of space between the players. They're not really overcrowding each other, therefore stretching the opposition. And now you can see also movement in between the lines for Bayern Munich. And this is really encouraged by the manager, right? At the same time, they're going to be vertical and then also play in between the lines. You can see the centre back also receiving the ball within that half space, which is really a great tactic. And now they can, so we're going to see a lot more back post goals from Barca. Flick also encourages a lot of movement in between the lines, as he wants to move the opposition and not the ball, really, right? And this is what you heard that Pep said, or is it Johan Cruyff, where you see some movement in between the lines. And this is the whole point of being vertical, because you're going to stretch the opposition and there's going to be a lot more space for your players to move around in, right? And then ultimately you see Flick wants to have, especially the half spaces, he loves these crosses from the half space, so he ultimately wants to be vertical, stretch the opposition, have the movement, and then have the right players on the ball. I have to say that even though I still stand on my word that Xavi should have stayed as manager, I think we should be interested in, not interested, excited is the word, to see Flick operate. And I just hope that spineless Laporta supports this man and give him everything that he needs. And we are now at a point where if things go wrong with Flick, we cannot blame Flick for this, really. We need to do an overhaul, and hopefully this does not happen. And hopefully I'm wrong, But I still feel like we should have give Xavi this chance to be a third year, as manager. But as always, guys, do subscribe to the channel. I would love to know what you think about Hansi Flick and the tactics that you've seen. If you want to add something, feel free to do it. That's why I started the channel, to interact with you guys, right? As always, do subscribe to the channel. Like I said, it's going to help us a lot to get this family to grow even bigger. In the next video, we're going to talk specifically about how would Flick's Barca look